Swear away.
Okay, peeps, on behalf of Albert, minus 10 or 11 degrees Celsius is about 12 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was trying to work that out.
Google is a wonderful thing, Albert. I was already working on it.
Why is the translation between Fahrenheit and Celsius so hard?
Good question.
It is not if you're above zero. It's very easy. So any degrees in Celsius, for instance, 4, you double it to get 8, and then you add 32. So you would be at 36 degrees Fahrenheit. So double whatever Celsius is and add 32. It's a bit more difficult when you're doing the negative Celsius stuff. But
okay, so I have a question of the day because it's freezing cold and horrible all over the US and in Canada. Are you planning your vacation for this spring, summer, fall? And if so, where are you planning on going? I thought we could vision a better time. Italy. Oh, cool. Oh, wow. People really are planning their vacations. Cool. Costa Rica, Brazil, Colorado, Houston, New Hampshire, Nags Head, Africa, Jamaica. Okay, people are going amazing places. Vicky's going to her flower garden, which also sounds awesome. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Oh yes, Banff. I can't wait to go to Banff for the Humane Canada Summit. Okay, so welcome to the Friday Animal Welfare Leadership Roundup call. I'm Kristen Hassan, and I'm happy to be here to help facilitate these calls. We have a really exciting topic to talk about today. And if you are new to these calls and you haven't attended previously, please tell us who you are and what organization you're with and what brought you to the call in the chat. We love to meet new folks, and every week we have some new people coming on the call. Before we get started into our agenda today, I want to turn it over to Mary Smith from Maddie's Fund.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Allison. So good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here. I don't think it's an exaggeration for me to tell you that February may be the shortest month on the calendar, but it feels like I have lived about 15 lifetimes in the past, 25 days. But nonetheless, here we are. I'm really excited to hear Steve Zeidman today. What you may not know is that most of the things that we do with data today are really because of Steve and Sue Della Magdalena. Sue was president, CEO of PetSmart Charities, and Steve had one of the coolest titles I have ever encountered. I think it was Chief Knowledge Officer. And I always thought that was just like the greatest thing ever. And so it's exciting that the two of them, worked so hard to make sure that we had systems in place to be able to track the work that we do in the way that we do. And it's wonderful to have him here today to be able to talk more about that. And speaking of data, there is a book that's called Every Nose Counts. It's using metrics in animal shelters. If you have never seen this book, you should really check it out, get it, memorize it, use it in every way possible, because it is such an effective resource to have. Thank you, Erica. You are a rock star. Dr. Jan Scarlett, Dr. Mike Greenberg, and Dr. Tiva Hoshizaki were the brilliant brains behind this book, and they've done so much to kind of set the scene for us, which I appreciate. And also our friends Mike and Brad are going to be talking about something that may in fact blow your minds. But let me tell you, most of our movement has been a long series of infighting with different factions based on either operational models, I don't know, height. Let's throw height in. Short people were fighting against tall people. I mean, it's crazy. We've always been arguing with each other, right? Most of the organizations that we have in animal welfare were started because, Jane couldn't get along with Sue, so she went down the street and started her own organization. Wow. Our history, our DNA is all about conflict. and sadly, not enough about resolution. But Mike and Brad are going to talk to us today about something that maybe we finally have to confront, and that is people that we consider to be on the opposite side of what we do are maybe people that we need to start collaborating with, working with, figuring out what they do, how they do it, and seeing if there's anything that we do that might be complementary to what they do. I don't know about all of you, but probably most of the people in my family, most of the people that I'm associated with have all gotten animals in their lives from breeders. And you want to know why? Because most of the time they didn't even know about shelters, which is actually probably the most, probably the best reason why. But the other reason is the worst reason why. And that is because they were turned down. They were either actively turned down or their applications were ignored. And, you know, I also sort of fall in that category because when I wanted to adopt Gracie, our third dog, it took me 6 months to actually find a group that was willing to adopt me. So yes, that could be more a function of the swear words that I use and the bad attitude that I have and all those other kinds of reasons. But the reality is I was willing to share my heart and my home with an animal that didn't have one. And for some reason that wasn't good enough. So I'm really excited that I think Mike and Brad get the Brave Heart Award today because of the things they're going to talk to us about. But I hope that we can actually listen to what they have to say with open hearts and minds. Instead of thinking that we're surrounded by the enemies, we should start to think about that it's possible that we're surrounded by partners that we had never envisioned before. And let's face it, when we look at what's happening on the world today, partnerships, collaboration, figuring out ways of getting along are so much better than what we're facing now with, you know, the just warfare and everything that comes with it, and all of the destruction and mayhem that's going on or potentially will go on. Thinking that we're going to be isolated from it is ridiculous. So thinking that our shelters or rescue groups can be isolated from some of the issues that are being raised today, well, it's time for us to kind of embrace the unknown and figure out a way of going forward. And the best thing is we don't have to do it alone. We have calls like this that help bring us all together so we can figure out solutions. So with that, I'm out. Have a good weekend.
Thanks so much, Mary. We want to, before we talk about the pet health data and get into our main topic for the day, we want to turn it over to any of our national organization partners who are on the call, who have updates to share.
Hey,
Stacey,
everybody.
oops, sorry.
Go ahead, Stacey.
Kathy, you and I were fighting.
You go first.
Rock, paper, scissors. So we have the United Spay Alliance conference this weekend, so I am a little punchy. And so I just wanted to let everybody know there is still plenty of room to join us if you want to talk about all things spay neuter this weekend. We're going to talk about how to do some strategic planning for your organization, some nuts and bolts, as well as staffing issues, which I'm sure is a hot topic with everybody. So if you want to find out more about the United Spay Alliance conference, we have 27 different presenters over the course of the next 2.5 days. You can go to the communitycatspodcast.com. And then the next week we have our TNR Trapper Certification Workshop, and we're continuing to looking for organizations that would like to collaborate with us as partners on the TNR Certification Workshop with their volunteers. So as folks know, anything about cats, if you need anything, just come my way.
Hey, everybody, Kathy from Canada. So as previously mentioned, our Summit for Animals is being held as a hybrid event this year in May. And that means that it's going to run throughout the entire month of May with 2 days in person in Banff, Canada, Alberta, beautiful Rocky Mountains. So we still have a few in-person places left, and we're still taking registrations for the online only. And we have almost 700 people registered for the online, which is great. So hoping to see some, if not all of you there in one way or another.
Good morning, everybody.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Dr. Pisano with Team Shelter USA, Maddie's Million Pet Challenge, and Open Door Veterinary Collective. And we are still looking for programs, clinics who are interested in the open door model. If you don't know about it, please check us out at maddiesmillionpetchallenge.org, hashtag thanks to Maddie's, and opendoorconsults.org. This is a financially sustainable clinic model, veterinary clinic model for for-profit or nonprofits that provides access to care. Thank you.
And I just wanted to let everyone, remind everyone that the We Foster Challenge applications open on Monday, the 28th.
Hey guys, real quick, I'm Alexis Pugh. I am on the NACA Board of Directors and sharing just a couple updates. I popped some stuff in the chat for you from NACA. We have a new course that we've just released, Animal Welfare for the Law Enforcement Officer. This would be great to share with police partners, sheriff's deputies, but it's really focused on people who don't work exclusively in animal welfare, but need more information about the work we do. Link there about nacatraining.org, how you can get involved there. Also, we're looking for any ideas, any trainings you would like to see NACA doing. There's an email address in the chat as well, naca@nacanet.org. Please look at our training calendar of events. If you have things you want to see, let us know. And lastly, we will be on site for Florida Animal Control Association and Carolinas Unite Conference. We will have tables at both of those, so please stop by and say hi to your NACA board members and representatives at both of those upcoming conferences.
Hi, this is Joanna from Petco Love. I just wanted to give you all an update. I know many of you are aware that we're trying to make March National Pet Vaccination Month. We're reducing vaccine preventable diseases by allocating K9 DAPPV and feline HCP vaccines to our animal welfare partners. And it's not too late to apply. I'm going to be pasting the link to our grants portal in the chat. And I hope you'll participate.
Good morning, this is Robin James and I'm from PetSmart Charities, and I just wanted to let everyone know that our veterinary scholarships have opened. So they're open, the application is open now, and it's for second and third year students that are focused on access to care. So I'll put the information in the chat.
This is Jamie from the Human Animal Sports Services Project. I just wanted to remind everybody to hit up our pro resources. We have a bunch of new really great resources available, from role of the facility to government communications, like we heard Katie talk about last week, and pet supply and demand, so transport getting started guide. So really good stuff. I'll stick the link in the chat.
And Dr. Livy put in the chat that the Big Dog Masterclass now has around 2,100 registrants. This is a free virtual conference opportunity, and it is really a very fast thing that was built to help with big dogs this spring and summer. We know, we are hearing all over the country that shelters are facing unprecedented challenges, and that there's no cushion for big dogs. Shelters are full now. And so the fear is when the busy spring and summer comes, that there will not be a cushion for big dogs. So this conference is just nitty gritty, how to get big dogs out of your shelter now, how to get them adopted, fostered, transported, to create that cushion that shelters are desperately going to need to avoid euthanizing for space. We are going to now move quickly to Steve Zeidman is here, as well as Dr. Levy, and I'm not sure if Brent's on the call today. We did a panel discussion about the data of the past 3 years. And so Steve and Dr. Levy are just going to jump in and share a little bit. If you haven't seen that webcast, it is well worth watching. There are so many discoveries in that data that were surprising to all of us. So Steve, welcome.
I'm muted. I fixed that. All right. Then after 2 years, you think we would have this down straight. Yeah, so I really do, as I said, like, I don't want to, for those who know, we did an hour and a half webinar on it. So we don't want to regurgitate the whole thing there. But I think one of the great things is, go to, they actually put the link there to my blog where we actually have the webcast posted. There was just a lot of great information about what happened through 2019, if we consider that the sort of standard year, if we call that, if there's such a thing, what happened through 2020, through the pandemic, and really what's happening in 2021, and really looking at what has happened in those 3 years, which were all extremely different and all have different causes and reasons for it happening. And I think it's such an important thing for us to be looking at. The big takeaways, and you'll see there, is that we had our first cut of what is, I'll say, what is in shelter management systems listed as a bully breed. Now, we could have a lot of discussions about how animals are listed, but there's a lot of that covered in the blog, and definitely a good read. And what else do I want to say? And then just a separation of cat and dog, because the stories are extremely different. And I think it's really important that we make sure we're telling the two stories, which are places, they're very different paths, particularly since 2020. And if anyone is watching and there's additional questions, I'm happy to answer anything that people have.
And Dr. Livy and Brent are both here as well. They were on the panel to discuss this. Do either of you have anything to add that you think is especially relevant to this group from that data?
I think the most striking thing for me was learning that intake was fairly stable and stagnant. I had the impression that intake was skyrocketing, and that is not borne out by the data. What is borne out by the data is outcomes are not happening. So adoptions are down, fosters are down, transport is way down. And so that is creating a bottleneck in the shelter and creating a crisis for space, and then all of the bad things that domino after with crowding, with behavior and health. And it does give us a roadmap of where to look at. We need to really focus on increasing outcomes. It's been hard, we hear, because of the staffing crisis and difficulty in having big events. Those have been on hold for a while, and people are trying to figure out how to bring them back. But those were the things that, besides the bully breeds not being as prominent as we all think they are, was really eye-opening for me.
Right.
And
even when you add in bully breed to mixed breed, you still only get to 27%. So yes, Brent, what else?
Yeah, I think piggybacking on what Dr. Levy was saying, I think to me, I think we all knew that adoptions tailed off a lot in 2020 just because we didn't have the supply of dogs, particularly in our shelters, and a lot of shelters were working at half and a quarter capacity at some places. But seeing that that's not rebounded at all, even as we started to coming back out of COVID, and as we started having that discussion, all of the barriers that we started putting in place, like over the last decade, we spent a lot of effort removing barriers to adoption and pet acquisition through shelters and through appointment only or being closed limited hours or that sort of thing. We've started layering in different barriers in place. And so we're starting to see that impact on a larger scale than just the non-rebound of adoption. So like that has really jumped out to me. And it's also impacting transports, I think, to Steve's point, because, if the receiving shelters aren't moving animals out, then there's nowhere for them to go on transport. And so it's dramatically impacted that number. But I thought Steve had a really great highlight at the very end of that that left us on a high note, is that, if we think about 10 years ago when shelters were full and at crisis capacity, like 10 years ago, those animals would have just been euthanized at our shelters. And the fact that shelters are now more committed than ever to creating positive outcomes for it, I think means that we're in a good spot. Like, it means our shelters are trying, and that everybody out there is trying really, really hard. It just means that we need to help. And I think this big dog masterclass couldn't be better timing, unless you want to move it up a couple of weeks, because the timing on that is so perfect for what we really need right now.
One other bit of tension is we have learned from our folks who study behavior that having the public not milling about the shelter all of the time is actually good for dogs and cats. So they do better without a crowd in the shelter. However, that is possibly paired with decreasing adoptions. And so how do we bring the public back to shelters in a way that doesn't add trauma to the animals that are there. And I think that's something we could work on between now and the Big Dog Conference, so that when we're ready to really go big and start getting people matched up with shelter animals again, we can do it in a way that doesn't bring along the difficulty for the animals.
Thank you all so much. We are aiming for 3,000 registrants for the conference, so we'll need your help to get there. So please share. This is designed for all levels of shelter staff, and it is RACE certified, so veterinarians can get RACE credits, 8 hours for attending. Okay, so we have a quick poll question. We wanted to, data is one thing, but your on the ground experience is another. And we wanted to get a sense of where your shelters are at now. So we have just one quick poll for you. Allison, I think we're ready to launch that. Okay, we're gonna launch them separately. So we have a few questions. We'll launch them all in succession. And this will just help us know if your experience on the ground is what the data is showing. So the number of dogs in care compared to February 2019. So this is pre-pandemic. The number of dogs in our care is, and then you choose one of the options. So we're trying to gauge is, do you have more dogs in your care than you did in 2019 at this time of year? And this is in care, so all the animals in your custody. And these are quick polls, so we'll just give you a few seconds to answer. So it looks like 27% said somewhat higher, 22% said much higher, 24% said the same, and 17% said somewhat fewer, and 10% said much fewer. Okay, we can move on to the next one.
And I'll say that matches the data.
Oh yeah, Steve, tell us if this matches the data. Okay, compared to 2019, the number of cats in our care is much higher, somewhat higher. I guess it should have said far fewer. I'm not sure what any grammar people know. I know much fewer is not right. Far fewer. These quick polls give us a snapshot to know if on the ground matches the data that we have. And so far, Steve says we are one for one matching. Okay, interesting about cats. So 31% say the same, 23% say somewhat fewer, 19% say much fewer, 19% say somewhat higher, and only 8% say much higher. Steve, is that?
Yeah, I'd say that's close because it is less than, well, I don't want to throw off the other one. So it is slightly higher. So it sort of compared to the other question, yes, I would say that's pretty close.
Okay, great. Next. Okay, compared to 2019, the length of stay in our custody of all animals is, this one's really easy, either longer, shorter, or the same. So is the length of stay longer than it was in 2019, or is it shorter, or is it about the same? And what we expect is to see, I think, Steve, a significant group saying longer. So 57% say longer, 20% say shorter, and 24% say the same.
And where I'll say that there is some differentiation in the data. If the animal is leaving the shelter, it is only slightly higher, the length of stay. But what we're seeing is there's still a lot of animals currently sitting in our buildings for much longer. So length of stay will go up, but it's not been significant for the animals who have actually left. So I thought that was really interesting.
Okay, and I think we have one more. Is that right, Allison?
It's up, prepared, equipped for busy season.
Oh, it is. Okay, it didn't show up for me. Is it coming up for other people?
Yeah, they're answering.
Oh, okay.
So we have a few more to, and there is one more after that too, which I think is a really good question.
Okay.
So we should definitely do that. All right, looks like most of the people. You just
If you hear my, okay, so it says, are you prepared or equipped for the busy season? 58% feel somewhat prepared and equipped. That is awesome. That's higher than I expected. 23% feel very prepared. 15% feel not at all prepared, and 3% are not sure. That's really interesting. I'm a little surprised by that, but that's great.
I think though, from a perspective is we have more cats in care than we've had at this time last year. And that if people don't realize that could be something that's going to throw them off if they're not prepared for that. Because right now you might be handling capacity, but if capacity really jumps, remember cats are very seasonal. There's going to be a huge jump. Is your capacity already being used up? And that's the thing I think a lot of shelters are going to have to pay attention to.
Okay, and the last one. My biggest concern about our organization right now is, and this is an important one, and so we didn't give you an all because that's too easy. We want to know the most significant issue that you're facing. And the options are staffing issues, higher number of animals entering, not as many adoptions, transfers, transports, not enough resources to do the job, or other. And if you answer other, please answer in the chat so we know we missed the specific worry you have right now.
Let's give this one another minute. People are still answering.
Kristen, something else that is absolutely amazing that Deb Fair just brought to my attention. This call is actually at capacity. We have room for 300 people and there's still folks trying to get into this call. So thank you all so much for being here. And if you're getting pinged by your friends, just tell them sit tight and hopefully they'll be able to get into the room.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, this is our biggest call ever. Okay. The biggest concern, staffing issues, 50%, that's expected. 20% not as many adoptions, transfers, transports, 17% not enough resources to do the job, and 8% say higher number of animals entering. Steve?
Yeah, well, obviously our data can't tell you the other ones, but we can tell you that the intake is around 2020's level, which is still low.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to move on to our main topic of the day, and I just want to take one moment of personal privilege to share a couple of opening thoughts to this. We're going to be talking about the future of supply of pets and what the role of animal welfare is in that. And in full transparency, I don't know that anyone's been more vocally outspoken against the idea that we need to be worried about a supply of animals. So, however, it's really important, I think, that we all try to understand and put ourselves in the shoes of folks who this is a real issue for. And these aren't people that don't care about animals. They're respected colleagues of ours. And so what I'm asking everyone to do is to try to give our speakers the benefit of the doubt on this subject, and disagreeing with them completely is okay. But to try to understand and walk in their shoes and kind of think about what situation they're facing and how we all might work together to also help find solutions as well. And as always, a couple of the ground rules of these calls are that we ask you to put comments and questions in the chat, not to speak while someone is presenting, and of course, no personal attacks or no, this is stupid and terrible idea. It's easy to have gut reactions to things, and this is a topic that many of us feel really strongly about. And so we can honor that and also really try to come to the table, as Mary said, openly understanding. So with that, I want to welcome our speakers, Mike Keiley and Brad Shear, who are here today to talk about this issue and to explain a little bit about what their world looks like in the Northeast and why they're concerned about this issue. So welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
I gotta
Brad's gonna
unmute
kick us off.
myself to start talking, sorry.
Take it away, Brad.
I'm Brad Shear. I am the CEO of the Potter League for Animals in Rhode Island. And thank you for the opportunity. And I think Mike's gonna introduce himself in a minute. Or Mike, do you wanna say hello now?
Hi, everybody. Mike Keiley from MSPCA Angel and Northeast Animal Shelter. I know we're limited on time, so we're going to blow through these slides and Brad's going to kick us off.
Okay. So if you're not familiar with New England, this is a picture of New England. It's the upper right-hand corner of the country. And you might notice Maine, the biggest of those states, is actually, much of it is north of a large portion of Canada. So Kathy lives west of Maine, not north of Maine, but that geography also, for them especially, creates some challenges around transport because of distances. So this is the region we're mainly focusing on today, and you'll notice New York is not part of New England. So I am with the Potter League. Mike's with this little organization called the Michael SPCA, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Potter League so you understand where we're he's muted so you can't argue with me. So we can tell you a little bit about where we're coming from and how we got here. So this is the Potter League's Animal Care Center. It's in Middletown, Rhode Island, which is the southeast corner of the state. This facility was completed at the end of 2008. It was the first LEED Gold certified animal shelter in the country and the first LEED Gold building of any kind in the state of Rhode Island. So it was built with environmental sustainability and efficiency in mind. The most noticeable feature is the vegetated roof, which you can see. That's why there's stuff growing on the roof, serves as an insulator for the floor below, but also a natural way to avoid moving water into our neighboring wetlands. That big dormer on the top with the big windows brings natural light down into the kennels below. And all of the water that hits the roof gets captured into a cistern behind the building, and that's the water we use to clean kennels, flush toilets, any gray water sorts of uses. So the materials in here are all sustainable materials, and so sort of environmental ethic along with our animal care ethic when this was built. To give you a little look inside, typical dog space on the left. You'll see that, well, they're all radiant floor heats for the dogs and cats. They're all enclosed. They each have their own separate air, so the 100% air exchange. So that little silver square on the left is an air return. The air is coming in, it's going out without mixing with other animals. That door to the back goes out into this space on the right. There's a couple spaces like this. So we can just open that back door and the dogs can go into this play space. And if you were standing behind the photographer, you would be outside in a fenced in area that this empties directly out of, which has proved to be really helpful especially with the dogs who are having behavior challenges. So we don't have to leash them up to let them exercise and run. We can just open a back door and they have space for running and playing. This is one of our cat spaces. So that's there's fiberglass walls with an airspace in between, so they're energy efficient, but also let natural light in. You can't see it, but to the left, there's a door to a catio. Again, these are all radiant floor heat. So there are 8 rooms like this, and then all the sort of traditional kennel spaces all are 3 wide. This is our training space. So we do public training, but also do a lot of work with our own dogs in here. Being New England, there's a large portion of the year where going outside isn't a great option. So we still have this running playing space indoors. So a little more about us. The Potter League was founded in 1929, and we started doing transports in 1995. It was called the Fetching Friends program. And for those of you who are old like me, it will be shocking to learn that 1995 was 27 years ago. I had to do the math a couple times to convince myself that it's been that long since 1995. But it was, so that's how long we've been bringing animals in from out of state. That's how long we have, really longer than that we have not been at capacity for local animals at the Animal Care Center. So we started that program pretty early. I think, in the world of transport programs. And in that same era, so all these programs didn't start in 1995, but I think of it as that era, in this about 20 to 25 years ago. We started a free behavior helpline that's still in existence today, and that includes referrals to in-person behavior help for people that can be made affordable if they need it. Our Pet Safe boarding program is about that old, and it provides emergency boarding for people in crisis. Commonly people in domestic violence shelter. We're seeing a lot of people who get referred to us by our local hospital. And our care program subsidizes veterinary care at private veterinary hospitals. So if someone goes to the veterinarian and they can't afford care, or they get a referral from us, then we will subsidize their care, sometimes 100%, more commonly, it's a portion of their bill. We hired our first full-time veterinarian in 2017. So fairly recently. Before that, there was a mix of volunteers, per diem vets, or taking animals to private hospitals to get things like spay and neuter surgery. Once we hired our private vet, that was really transformative. Our full-time veterinarian was really transformative for the organization. Almost immediately, we see cat length of stay drop in half, dog length of stay drop by about 20%, and we increased intake. Since we increased transport, we increased intake, total intake by about 30% after bringing the veterinarian on full-time, most of that through transport. At the same time, we started doing public wellness. Most of that is, for this veterinarian, is free wellness clinics that take place at public housing complexes around our community, and we do some at the local food pantry, the largest food pantry in the community. We also started a food pantry about the same time. So that first year in 2017, we gave away about 2,000 pounds of food through the pantry. Last year, it was 40,000 pounds of food. So we've seen a huge increase in demand for that, and we give it away largely through human food pantries. So the pantry have a great partnership that's nearby in Newport. They also have a mobile pantry that we meet them at, but we also give it away through our facilities, and we give food to other shelters around the state. So then in 2019, we took over the operations of an existing spay and neuter clinic that had been there about 9 years in Warwick. So if you look at these red dots, the lower right-hand corner was the animal care center I showed you. That was the oldest of the facilities. And then this little dot that's just north of where it says Warwick, it's actually in Warwick, is our spay and neuter clinic. So all they do there is spays and neuters, high volume, high quality spay and neuter clinic with veterinarians trained by Spay and Neuter Alliance. And then in 2020, again, there was a pre-existing nonprofit veterinary clinic that we acquired called the Pets in Need Clinic. That's the other red dot a little further up and to the right. And that is a full service veterinary clinic that only sees people who either receive public assistance or are disabled veterans. And we have plenty, we are plenty full with those two clients. So the spay and neuter clinic on most days has 2 veterinarians, some days has 1. Pets in Need, usually 2 veterinarians, sometimes 3. And once a week at Pets in Need, we have a doctor who's board certified in internal medicine so we can cut down on referrals. To give you an idea of geography, how big Rhode Island is. So from our animal care center to our spay and neuter clinic is about a 40-minute drive. So that spay and neuter clinic is within 40 minutes or less than 90% of the population of the state. Just between those 2 red dots and that big mess of highways is Providence, which has about 20% of the state's population. So those are purposely located in adjacent to the areas of highest need in the state. This year, our plan is to add a community-based person. We're calling a community navigator, who will do work similar to the kind of work that's done by folks who are doing Pets for Life. I think with all these recently added options to help people. Our biggest problem is that they're not well known enough, and we need that community connection. So that is what's coming for us. And I think, for us, I think the takeaway from all this is, one, we're taking in more animals than we have in many years, about half of them from transport. Some of that transport is in state, but mostly out of state. And but at the same time, the organization has doubled in size in the last 5 years, doubled in the number of staff, doubled in budget. But that increase has been in the areas of helping animals that are already in homes. We have not, since 2017, significantly increased the traditional sheltering services, because what we're seeing in our community here is a need for, largely for help with veterinary care, but also help with food and some of those other services for everyone.
Thanks. I just want to jump in, and we have about 19 minutes, so I want to make sure
we'll go fast. All right. This is just the front of that Pets and Need clinic right before it opens. Mike, go fast.
All right. Well, I'll speed it up. So MSPCA Angel made up a lot of different parts: the hospital division, and animal protection division, of which I oversee our 3 adoption centers throughout Massachusetts, and then now also affiliated with the Northeast Animal Shelter, which will become an MSPCA shelter next year. Community outreach and 3 community clinics. So won't bore you with all of these details. But probably the important thing to just note is this is about our intake. And sorry, I left that notation about the mice that we took in this year in here. And I think it's just important to note that our local populations, Massachusetts is the most populous state. We're the largest shelter system in New England, and we're open admission. So we probably saw the change in population the last out of most of the shelters in New England. And you can see the important part on that top part is that it really doesn't go gradually. Once we hit a tipping point, the intake locally dropped precipitously over the next number of years, which was really surprising to us. And this is without relocation. So this is just our local population alone. So you can go ahead, Brad. And with relocation added in, it sort of stabilized that trend a little bit, but you can still see that it's dropping pretty significantly. And the MSPCA has only a small relocation program compared to Northeast Animal Shelter, which we affiliated with last year. Move on, Brad. Well, and I think the important part for us is when we sort of got to a point where our shelters had empty kennels, we really started to look at what is the need that's in our community. And overpopulation no longer was a main issue to combat. And really, we wanted to move from a reactive point to a proactive point to address animal issues. And that's where we formed our community outreach programs and we developed our community clinics. And I want to just point out that the community clinics was a strategy that we put into place because, quite frankly, more animals were dying in hospitals because people couldn't afford their care than they were dying in shelters in New England. And so we felt like the important thing for us to do was to figure out how do we help the animals that are in our community that are at risk with different strategies than we've used in the past, and not just immediately jump to relocation as a solution to that dropping population. Now, we did still address that, like I mentioned. Northeast Animal Shelter is the largest relocation center in New England, taking in between 4,000 to 5,000 animals a year through relocation. And so we wanted to establish community outreach and community clinics first because that's what our community needed. And in 2022, we did the same thing. We were going to be expanding community outreach and community clinics. And I won't bore you with all these stats, but ultimately, when we tally up the stats, you can see that we're almost helping double the number of animals outside our shelter walls than we are helping inside our shelter walls. And I'll just note that the live release rate for local dogs is lower than the relocation because the dogs that are coming into our shelters are far more complex behaviorally, aggression, age, health issues, and quite frankly, most of the time, a combination of 2 or 3 of those issues. You can move on, Brad. And this is just a map of where we relocate animals from with MSPCA and Northeast Animal Shelter. So we're trying to help as much as we can, as many communities, and we'll continue to expand that through partnerships with ASPCA and other groups that we work with. And just noting here the differences between New England and the rest of the nation, the population numbers, the intake subtypes, stray intake is clearly leading the way there. And then when you look at New England, the most number of animals coming into shelters are through relocation. And we're pretty small compared to the number of animals coming in nationally. So that's just to show the scale difference. Go ahead, Brad.
And so a few years ago, a group of us in New England did some surveys of a bunch of different constituents. This compares responses to this question about what the biggest problems are in our community, and compares the general public, which is the blue lines, to people working in animal welfare organizations, which is the orange lines. And you'll see that, so at the top, people working in animal welfare are not at all concerned about animal shelters euthanizing dogs and cats, and only about 12% of the general public were concerned about that in New England, because live release rates are just high here, because half or more are coming in from relocation, and as Mike showed, almost all those are adopted. What people are concerned about are affordability of veterinary care and animal abuse. But so that's the public rates those highly. Of course, the people in animal welfare are very concerned about affordability of veterinary care, not so concerned about animal abuse, because we know it's just not a big part of what we are actually doing. I think that's the public perception is more a result of TV commercials than of reality. And we're both worried about stray cats. But you can see the public perception in New England really does reflect the reality to a large extent of what's happening here. And so we respond to that. Nationally, there's, as you can see, about 5.5 million animals going into animal shelters, about 30 million animals living in households that are food insecure, about 50 million animals that have no access to veterinary care. So like Mike said, when we're looking at what's happening in our community, our animal shelter numbers are even a smaller percentage of that. So the other two are larger in scale for us. So, our focus becomes, what are we doing to work on the needs of our community? I think this is Mike's.
I think the questions that really people are asking is, are New England shelters really planning to breed? And the answer is no. That's not necessarily something that we're imminently planning right now. But if you go to the next slide, Brad, I think the question about, are we concerned about pet acquisition? The answer is a resounding yes. We're concerned about it not in the future, but we're concerned about it right now. It is an issue that we recognize in New England, that humanely acquiring an animal is a challenge for most communities.
I'll talk about this a little bit, just as we are transitioning the world of animal welfare. Clay Shirky is a professor at NYU. The Shirky principle is that complex solutions, companies, industries become so dedicated to solving a single problem that they have been created to solve, that often they inadvertently perpetuate the problem. And the most common application for this that we talk about is our healthcare system, which was created to treat illness, and it's having a very hard time shifting to keeping people healthy. The place I see this in our industry, most common, probably the most obvious is, very difficult adoption restrictions. So we are actually perpetuating the problem that we were created to solve by making it hard for people to adopt from us. But as we transition, I think we really need to think as an industry, as a movement, about whether we are unintentional, and it's important that it is unintentional, that we are perpetuating the problem that we were created to solve, rather than shifting to purely solutions. So some of the things we thought we could discuss.
I think on these parts, sorry to talk over you there, Brad, but I think really rethinking our spay neuter policies is something that we have considered in New England shelters. Some of those are really subtle components, like not spaying very pregnant cats and dogs, but instead putting them in foster and allowing them to give birth. Whether we really adhered to pediatric spay neuter at the same level, and whether there are questions about should we be spaying and neutering every animal that we adopt out. There are some challenges with that, obviously, if we were to explore it. Massachusetts has regulations that requires us to spay neuter. But I think the question, and I'll jump down to the last one, is if you're a family living in subsidized housing and you can only have dogs that are under 35 pounds, where are you going to get those from? There is not any coming in through relocation. for the most part, they're not coming in locally to shelters. And if they did, so many policies that shelters have would restrict, wouldn't adopt people that are living in subsidized housing. And where are those folks going to be able to get their animals is a question. We know that they, from the work that we do, that it provides enrichment to their lives, and that human animal bond is important, but are we putting them in a position where they can't possibly get animals from a humane source? And quite frankly, the most of the time they're getting them from their communities, in which we're vilifying those people that are breeding and calling them backyard breeders or irresponsible breeders. And do we need to rethink the way that we're sort of categorizing those things? To me, my biggest concern is if people in our communities can't get animals through adoption, and we are successful in shutting down puppy mills, how are people going to acquire them? And are we spending enough time thinking about the relationships with breeders that fill in that middle gap? Responsible breeders, we know, may be harder to acquire animals from than shelters are. And I think that's really the conundrum that we're dealing with right now in New England, as being kind of that forefront of this shift in animal population, is experiencing these at the forefront of those. And I think it's not for us. I think when we delve into this topic, we tend to get stones thrown at us because the belief is that we're ignorant to the other issues that are happening in other regions of the country. That's not the case. What I think we are taking on as additional responsibility is recognizing that we're at that forefront of shifts. Is how do we grapple with these issues in a way that we might be able to provide a roadmap for others as they start to experience these issues for the first time when their population numbers drop. And there are more and more communities around the country that are starting to look more and more like New England. And it's a reality I think we all have to prepare for, is when these shifts happen, how do we adjust to them? And my hope is maybe we have some of these conversations up front so other people don't have to struggle through in real time like we are this moment. I think that's the end of our slides, and happy to have.
So
any
it took more
questions
time than we were supposed to, but so we'll have to do a speed round with questions, Kristen.
Well, I think the question that's going to be on the top of everyone's mind is like, okay, great. Can we all send you animals? Because we have lots. Why is transport not filling the gap?
Well, I can tell you from like I said, we're transporting more animals than we ever have. I think for us, there is some, for everyone, there is some capacity. And the demand in our area is higher than what our capacity is. So part of the challenge is, of course, in order to make it worthwhile to transport animals up, you want to bring like 20 at a time. So we have to get down to 20 empty kennels. We tend to have a boom and bust cycle. We've been experimenting with all sorts of different strategies to smooth that out, some with more success than others. So, we get 5 a week instead of 20 every 3 weeks. And like I said, some are more successful than others, but we have, like I said, the building was built in 2008. That was after we started transporting, but it still wasn't designed to, it was designed to take in 3, 4, 5 animals a day, adopt out 3, 4, 5 animals a day, and not to take in 20 and spend the next week or two adopting them out. So that I think part of it is just capacity issues. And like I said, we also have people in our community who need our help. But Mike, you transport a lot more than we do, so I don't know how much you can.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that gets trickier is, if people had an overabundance of cats, we could take cats and adopt them out, really just building that capacity, because cats are all roughly the same size, same hair coat. And really we're just down to personality at that point. But dogs, I think the challenge is, has been mentioned here, is that there's a big dog class for a reason. That we're trying to sort of tackle this issue as an overcapacity of dogs, but recognizing that the adopter, the person looking to acquire animals, has a lot of variance in the size of the animal they're looking for, the hair coat, behavior needs, medical needs, age, all of those things. And so what may be the reality is that the type of dog that becomes harder and harder to transport to satisfy that need are the smaller dogs or hair coat dogs. And what I think most shelters are experiencing is an overabundance of larger breed, bully breeds. And I think that's not how people are looking to acquire animals. And it's hard to convince our community to that's looking for a smaller breed or a hypoallergenic dog to consider a bully breed or a large breed dog. So I think it's certainly a challenge. And for us, the other part is the regulations are getting tighter and tighter as New England tends to transport more than some other regions. There's been some restrictions put in place that makes it harder for us to be able to do that relocation in the way that's helpful to the community or to the shelter that has the overabundance.
Dr. Levy has a question. I want to keep this lightning round since we're going to go about 5 minutes over if you all can stay, because I know there are a ton of questions. And Dr. Levy, over to you.
Okay. I first want to establish my credentials. I bought a dog 6 months ago, a Greyhound puppy that I kind of waited a year for to get. It's my breed and we don't have racing anymore, so it's harder to get. So I went to a family that raised the puppies in their home, which I thought was the way all dogs should come into life, is in a family that loves them and getting the attention. So I went at the same time in Florida. Petland has a big campaign to change the law in Florida so that local communities cannot ban sales of puppies in stores. And they are saying it is a pet protection act against puppy mills. And we all know that Petland sources from brokers and puppy mills. So there's this disinformation campaign. So my question is, with your vision of breeders, is it the home breeder, the hobby breeder, the breeder that is knowledgeable about health and is testing and breeding and everything? Or does your eventual vision for breeding include pet stores and kennels where the parents live in kennels and not homes?
So I don't know that I have a clear vision for breeding. My hope right now is that we have a relationship with everybody in our community that has pets, no matter where they got them from, so that, someone who, like you're saying, Julie, can get a pet from someone who has bred them and not feel like they're going to be demonized when they come into our organization and ask for help or want to connect with us. I have not seen, there are some emerging standards, mostly coming from Purdue, as you probably know, around large scale breeding. I haven't seen anything in terms of, from those standards or others for large scale breeding operations that would make me comfortable saying that they are humane or a place that I would want to source pets from. So, I certainly would not be thinking of them as, somebody I would want to partner with. I think more about, when we go do those wellness clinics in the community room of public housing complex, they have a size limit, 30 pounds. We don't have enough small dogs to supply them. If they go to a pet store or breeder, they're too expensive. A lot of those dogs look the same. A lot of them look like they're related. They're being bred in that community. And if we tell them you have to spay and neuter all your pets, or, you're bad for getting from a breeder, there will be no dogs there. And there's no other source for that community. And I guess I'm not comfortable telling people whether or not they can have a pet because of their financial circumstances, because that's what we're saying to them is, we are advocating for you to not have one, right? Because we don't have another option. So, I think what I want is to make sure that all animals have access to care, that they're humanely treated, and that we're not pushing anybody away, no matter where they got their pet from. So if you come to me and say, my neighbor had a litter of puppies, that's where my puppy came from, then you're going to be accepted by us, and you're going to have access to our services, and you're going to be able to access our food pantry and our veterinary clinic, and we'll be accepting of you. And in terms of the individual, the same if they got it from a pet store. But I think the source is really challenging for me. I don't see a clear way to be accepting of those large scale operations, what we call puppy mills. I just haven't seen a standard yet that I would be comfortable with. Okay.
Mike, I think we've talked a little bit about spay neuter, and I think it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. And I think I think there's a lot of common ground actually that we're not maybe thinking of. And the issue to me seems around smaller breed hypoallergenic dogs, that that is really the shortage issue. And do you foresee us just like not altering those animals and just saying we're not going to do the free low cost spay neuter on this group of animals? Or do you see us taking a more proactive role in actually engaging those people to produce litters of puppies?
I think it's entirely possible. And I should just say, I've been at the MSPCA for 28 years, and our shelter, when we started off, we were euthanizing for space. We were challenged just like any other shelter that's dealing with too many animals coming into their location and managing that. And I never would have guessed that when I started in animal welfare, we'd ever be talking about not having enough dogs, not having enough cats, or the possibility that spay neuter wouldn't be something that we would push as heavily as we have. And I think for me, what I'm recognizing first and foremost is that we are really just getting stuck on, a black and white issue here. That if you spay and neuter, you're good. If you don't, then you're bad. And it's reflected in some people's adoption policies where they won't adopt you if you have an unspayed or unneutered animal at home. We need to really just take a step back and look at, what is it we're trying to get towards. And if we're starting to see a change in the overpopulation throughout the country, and in certain regions, then I think everything has to be on the table, because we've been combating overpopulation for so long. It's like breathing for us. We just have the same answers each time. We're not really thinking critically about, is there a shift that we need to make? And I think it's pretty clear that certain breeds of dogs or small breed dogs aren't as prevalent in a lot of shelter systems, including New England. And at some point, there has to be another way for people to acquire animals humanely. It may not be shelters, and it may not be the sort of creme de la creme responsible breeder. We don't want it to be puppy mills. So what is it that we're going to do to provide that opportunity for people to acquire animals in the future, but have it done in the right way? Do we have a role in that as a shelter? Or do we really just sit at the table to talk about how do we make larger scale breeding as humane as possible, so that a bad actor doesn't fill that void? And they will. People will fill that void if we don't come up with a solution, or at least engage in that conversation.
And one more question that is sort of the other concern that I hear and also share is that how do we, because I get it, it makes sense, but how does this not throw actual shelter dogs under the bus? Like, how does this not become a thing where these new dogs entering the shelter system are the winners and shelter dogs are the losers? And I'll reference, there's a group that does breed mixed breed dogs, and on their website, they talk about these being better. They're better family pets. They're more well-adjusted. They're not traumatized by the shelter. And my fear is that once this starts, then all the dogs in the shelter suddenly become less desirable to the public overall.
I think this idea that I think breeders are always selling their dogs that way, right? That they're somehow better than a dog that you would get somewhere else. I don't know if that's a function of people just breeding mixed breeds, but I think they're always saying that. And I mean, there's a lot of historic marketing strength behind the AKC telling us that the purebred dogs are somehow better. And I'm sure there's lots of people on here who have their favorite breeds. Sorry, Dr. Levy, if you love greyhounds, that's great. But I've never gotten a purebred dog. Well, when I was a little kid, we had one, but so it's never been important to me. But I think everybody's saying that. I don't think that's new. I don't think it's specific to being mixed breed. And I do, part of the data that we got from that survey that I mentioned in the presentation was that New Englanders, when they're searching for an animal, are looking at shelters and rescue, the sources we want to look at to them for, that's where they want to acquire pets from. It is not necessarily where they get them from, because, partially because it's challenging to get them in some cases, and partially because there isn't enough supply. But they also told us that once someone has a pet, if your friend gets a dog or a cat, and they don't care where it came from, right? If my friend bought a dog from a pet store, people are not judging them for that. So I think in one sense, our brand is good in terms of people initially wanting to acquire pets from us, but it doesn't last. I mean, once you actually, have a dog sitting in your lap, that it kind of goes away. right? So if we want to continue to be in the acquisition business, I think job one is to make it easier on people. We can be very challenging, but I think we've got to accept reality, which is we're not the only player in that game of pet acquisition, and we should know what's happening, have some connection to what's happening from the other acquisition sources, and have some influence there. And I don't think we can just say breeding is bad and shouldn't happen, and therefore we're going to ignore it. I think we want to be, touching those people in our community, know who they are in our community who are breeding, and know what's happening, and know, where they're coming from. So, I think our past approach of just saying breeding is bad, and therefore it's hard for us to connect to them. We should think about how that impacts actually being able to have influence over how those animals are cared for. And I think we just get shut out.
I really want to say I appreciate you both coming and talking on this issue. And it sounds like a lot of folks feel like the conversation, it needs to continue, because I think some folks like me have trouble wrapping their head around even the concept, but it's really helpful to be able to talk through some of these, and there are many more questions. I'm hoping we can get you both back soon, and others who are talking about this to continue. And just want to express my gratitude to you both and everyone on the call today. Nothing is as simple as this or that. There's a lot of complexity here. And I think that's the takeaway from today, is that this isn't just a simple issue that necessarily we need to fall on one side of, but we can think more about those complexities. Does that sort of sum it up, what's important for folks to walk away with today? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would like for people to walk away just thinking, how does what I say and do strike people in my community who maybe got their pet from a breeder or a pet store? Are they going to want to have a relationship with me if I tell them that they're bad people for going somewhere else for their pet? And personally, I want to have a relationship with everybody in my community who has pets. I don't want anybody to feel shut out. That doesn't mean that I think puppy mills are okay, because I don't. But if somebody got him and the dog is in my community, then I want to be able to connect to that person.
Great. And Mike, any last words from you?
Well, I'm excited about this conversation. I'd love to continue it, because it is a really meaty conversation, and I think it needs a good amount of time. But I think the only thing I would say is, just in the industry, is let's all keep an open mind as we navigate through this, and that we can probably find a lot more common ground than differences, as long as we're willing to have these conversations and be open to experiencing what the differences that are happening in various regions, and come to that table with an open discussion and an open mind.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. This was our biggest call ever. So we appreciate you being here, and we will be back next week, and hope you all have a wonderful weekend and stay warm and think about those vacations. Talk to you all later. Happy Friday.
Bye, everyone.